good morning, good evening, and good afternoon for people from all over the world. We are very honored to invite Annie to give us this seminar tonight. Annie is an outstanding graduate from our town. She used to be the Miss Rochester when she was in high school, and I still remember her at like the Chinese New Year celebration. And so she graduated from our high school, and then she did her bachelor degree at University of Pennsylvania, and then she went ahead working in consulting firms, and she started her own nonprofit organization. And now she's heading to Tsinghua University for a 1-year master program. I think it's training the future world leader, right? So now I will let Annie to start introduce herself and then to start her seminar. I think Annie, you want me Annie want to have this poll to see like what the audience are. So you can fill this if you click. Oh, Annie, I think you are somehow muted. I don't hear you. Can anyone else hear her? I didn't hear her. I'm sharing the poll results. Most of the attendees tonight is high school students.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, cool. Great. Looks like we have mostly high school students here. We have some parents and also some middle school students and college students too. You middle schoolers are too ahead of the curve here. But great. Okay. Well, thank you all for filling out the poll, and very excited to meet you all and have so many people here with us this evening. Good evening or good morning, depending on where you are in the world. And thank you, Yi, for the really great introduction. So like Yi said, I am from Rochester, Minnesota. I have been sort of all around the US, and I'm heading to Beijing in a few weeks. And I'm just really excited to share 3 lessons that I've learned through my education, through my career so far on finding your passion. Let's jump in. Oh, before I go in, I just wanted to say, if anyone has any questions along the way, feel free to just unmute yourself and ask. I'm quite informal, or you can raise your hand. I might not see the chat just because I'm sharing my screen. So if you put something in the chat and if I don't respond, feel free to just unmute yourself and jump in. But also very happy to answer questions at the end as well. To begin, my name is Annie. I'm an incoming Schwarzman scholar. I'll give you guys a little bit more information on that program towards the end of this seminar. But to start with the basics, I grew up here in Rochester, Minnesota, and I went to Mayo High School, where I was class of 2015. I graduated from the University of Pennsylvania in 2019, and Penn is in Philly, so I've been out on the East Coast for a little bit. Today, I'm an associate consultant at LEK Consulting in Boston, and I am also the co-founder of Oraculi, which is a STEM mentorship nonprofit. Very excited and definitely can talk a lot about that if anyone is interested in helping us out. And finally, I'm an incoming Schwarzman scholar in the class of 2022 of the 6th cohort. With that said, those are some basics. I also wanted to share some fun things as well. So I compete nationally in ballroom dancing. I picked this up in college, and today my favorite dances are standard and smooth. So this is usually waltz, tango, foxtrot, Viennese waltz, quick step. I also fostered a working dog in training named Bailey during my senior year in college. Today, she's working as a search and rescue dog in Miami, Florida. So we're all very proud of her, and she's doing really great things every single day. And finally, I can type in 2 different versions of English. And I know most people are probably thinking, I didn't even know there was more than one version of English, but I can type in 3, which is what everyone usually types in. Oh, I can also type in another keyboard, Borjak. We have someone maybe off mute, but probably fine now. Okay. To kind of recap my journey, so far it's taken me from Rochester out to Philadelphia, Boston, and now very soon to Beijing. I started as a psychology major at Penn. I studied psychology, with a minor in marketing, and I was also a former pre-med for about 3 semesters. While on campus, I was very involved with 2 major organizations. I was captain of the ballroom team, which is called Penn Latin and Ballroom Dance, PLBD for short. I was also chair of the Penn Undergraduate Health Council, called PUC. I'll often call these just PUC and PLBD. At Penn, we really like our acronyms, and many of them start with P. So if you hear those acronyms, that's what they are. Today, I'm at LEK Consulting. I joined in July 2019 after graduating from college, and I quickly became really involved in our pro bono projects. Within my first year, I was able to lead 2 cases for the Boston Ballet and All Hands and Hearts, which are 2 local Boston area nonprofits. In April 2022, while I was back home in Minnesota during the start of the pandemic, I founded Oraculi with a few of my good high school friends. I was really frustrated with the state of the regional science fair, and I knew I could do something to support students who lack the resources to participate in the fair. So we put our heads together and founded Oraculi. And in the upcoming weeks, I'm really, really excited to embark upon my next adventure, which is Schwarzman Scholars. This is a 1-year master's program designed to build a global community of future leaders with the end goal to deepen understanding between China and the rest of the world. And what's going on after that? Well, to be honest, I can't exactly say where I'll be 1, 5, 10, 50 years from now, but I know I will be doing something I love. With all that said, now on to the main topic for tonight, 3 lessons for finding your passion. My first lesson is to give up. Just kidding. So this would be not a very inspirational speech if it truly was give up. So the first lesson is actually give up dreams that aren't yours. Let me tell you guys a story. So I grew up in Rochester, Minnesota. And for those of you who are familiar with Rochester, Minnesota, we are known for the Mayo Clinic, which is the #1 hospital in the entire world, which is kind of crazy to think considering we're such a humble little town. But when you grow up in a city that is otherwise known as Med City, you're surrounded by an ecosystem of medicine and of science. I knew I loved working with kids ever since I was little. I loved babysitting. I loved, working with kids, learning from kids. So from a pretty young age, I thought I wanted to be a pediatrician. In high school, I did biomedical research. I participated in science fair, and I definitely thought it was interesting, but I didn't necessarily love it. I remember throughout high school, I would always hear, do what you love, and you don't have to work a day in your life. And I would often think, okay, I definitely like biology. I can tolerate it. I don't hate it, like I hate calculus, but I don't necessarily love it. But then at the same time, I would think, maybe I don't actually know what love truly is. Maybe just this ambivalence that I feel towards biology is actually loving the subject. And now looking back, since hindsight is 2020, I started to realize the one class that I actually did love in high school was psychology. But at the time in taking psychology, I didn't really consider it as like a real major. I didn't really think of it being something that I would end up studying. For me, it was just kind of like a fun subject that I just really enjoyed and would take in high school, but would never really make a career out of it. And again, hindsight is 2020, right? So I went to Penn and I started as a pre-med, thinking that I would become a pediatrician. I took first year of introductory bio. I took the first year of introductory chem. I took first semester of physics. And, after all these introductory classes, I started to recognize that maybe medicine wasn't what I thought it would be. I wasn't really that interested in all these sciences like I had kind of thought I would be. I had this idea that I'm going to become the best doctor and have such a great understanding of science. And to be honest, science just really didn't resonate with me. My sophomore year, first semester, I was starting to kind of have an internal war with myself. I tried to convince myself that I loved physics or that I loved studying biology, when in reality, studying the subject just became so boring. It just became so I didn't have any passion for it. It became such a chore to study. And the funny thing is, around the same time, I started to sit in on a social psychology class with a friend. And To kind of give a little bit of context, I actually wasn't even registered for this class, so I wasn't getting any credit for it. I was just spending, an extra 5 hours every single week sitting in this lecture hall, learning about social psychology, not getting any credit, obviously not having to get a grade for it, and just doing it for fun because I genuinely found the lectures really interesting. And, I came to the end of the semester and I kind of thought, okay, I just sat in on a semester's worth of classes. Now I might as well take that and get some credits since I've already learned all the topics. So I took that social psych class, and that started to really reintroduce me to my love of psychology, which started in high school. The second semester of my sophomore year, I ended up declaring my major in psychology, which I did actually end up love studying. So again, the first lesson, I learned to give up on this dream of becoming a physician, which at the time I thought was my dream, but I realized was actually the result of the ecosystem that I had grown up in. It wasn't truly ever my dream. It was what I was made to believe was my dream. So once I declared my major in psychology, the kind of next path was, okay, I'm studying psychology. What can I actually do with this degree, right? And the natural path with psychology is to go on to graduate school, to pursue a PhD, either join academia or maybe become a clinical psychologist. So after my sophomore year, I did a summer of psychology research. And while it was definitely interesting and I loved thinking about the topic, I couldn't see myself making a career out of this. I couldn't see myself studying psychology for decades to come, looking at one specific topic the way that academia requires. And I thought, what actually gets me out of bed every single morning, right? All the people that I knew in academia lived and breathed their subject. They would think constantly about their research topic, and they would always be so enthusiastic about it. And that definitely wasn't me. I don't think I could ever have that type of enthusiasm for one specific research topic. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized what really gets me out of bed in the morning was what I was doing on campus in my leadership roles. So at the time, I was the chair of the Penn Undergraduate Health Council, otherwise PUC. And what PUC does is we are an umbrella group. So all the different health-related clubs and organizations on campus are governed by PUC. So we're kind of like a student government organization you could think about. And our role was we would actually bring together all the student leaders of these health organizations to try to move the campus forward. And at that time, the campus actually had a lot of mental health crises happening. The students were really unsettled with how the administration was handling things. There were a lot of things wrong with the curriculum. And overall, there was just a lot that needed to be done for mental wellness. And as chair of PUC, I was really given an opportunity to step up as a leader to connect the students with the administrators and ultimately elect a chief wellness officer, the very first one in the Ivy League, which was so great to see. And I was very happy to be a part of that committee. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I loved what I was doing with PUC. I loved being able to wake up in the morning and think, what am I going to do with PUC today? And what is my role as chair of PUC, going to do to impact Penn's campus? How am I going to change how Penn exists for next year's students? For students 5 years from now, 10 years from now? How is what I'm doing today going to impact the legacy of this campus moving forward? And that was really what got me out of bed every single morning. I was really excited with what I was doing there. And that led me to consulting, which is fairly similar in that you're thinking long-term about strategy for companies instead of on-campus organizations. Again, that then led me to realize, and brings us back to this first lesson, giving up on the dream of pursuing academia, which was kind of a dream of mine, but was never really my true dream to begin with. It was a dream, it was like a path that was very set. My parents were both, fairly academic. They originally came to the US planning to pursue PhDs, so they're kind of familiar with the idea. And it just seemed kind of easy. But the more I realized, the more I recognized that, okay, this path of academia is not really something that I'm that enthusiastic about. So I gave up on that dream. As a quick detour, I recognize some of you may not be familiar with what consulting is, particularly you middle schoolers who've managed to sneak into the session. So what is management consulting? According to Wikipedia, consulting is the practice of helping organizations to improve their performance. And like we all know, Wikipedia is sometimes really good at telling us a lot about something without helping us understand what that something is. So to translate, consultants are problem solvers. And it comes in many flavors. You have management consulting, you have tech, healthcare, even nonprofit, education, government consulting, all types of consulting exists out there. But at the end of the day, all consultants work with a client to solve their most pressing business problems. We are external people who are very unbiased, and we go in and we help our clients understand what's going wrong in the situation and what can we do to improve it and to make sure that it stays improved for the long term. At my current company, LEK, we focus on strategy, which includes a few things, definitely among others. First off, it includes growth strategy. How can I help my company grow and thrive today, tomorrow, and furthermore in the future? It also includes mergers and acquisitions. Say company A wants to acquire company B. How do we make sure that company A acquires company B successfully? And how can we ensure that A and B companies merge and become an effective, A prime company? And then finally, you also have organization and performance. How do I make sure my business is running at the top of its game? What do we need to add to the business to make sure that it continues to run at the top of the game? Potentially, what do we need to take away from the company to make sure that it's at the top of its game? All of these are questions that consultants ask and questions that we answer in our cases. I'm also very happy to talk about more detail about what consulting is at the end, as well as the process of recruiting and getting a job in consulting. So that brings us to the end of the first lesson, giving up on dreams that aren't yours. The second lesson is advocate for yourself. To bring us back to my experience at Penn, there I was the summer before junior year. I had just, finished a summer of psychology research. I had declared my major in psychology, decided that I didn't want to go into academia, was interested in consulting. But I wasn't really sure how or even if I could do it. Although consulting doesn't require a specific major, most of the time consultants come from an economics or a business background. It's definitely helpful to have that knowledge. As a psychology major, the last time I had taken econ was like AP econ in 10th grade in high school. So at that time, it had been almost 4 years since I had last thought about economics. So there was quite a bit of stuff that I had to learn in order to prove to these consulting firms that I deserved a role at their company. So starting my junior year, I applied for internships for the summer after my junior year, and I honestly didn't have that much luck. I was a psychology major who had last taken econ 4 years ago, and I was competing with some of the best students from Wharton, which is the best business school in the US. And finally, I got an email back, but the unfortunate thing is I was selected as an alternate for an interview. This meant that if anyone didn't make their scheduled interview slot, I could get a chance to do that interview. And as it turned out, I crossed my fingers, leading up to the interview day. And the very night before, there turned out to be one open spot left for the alternates. But the thing is, this is like such a bad system now that I'm looking back. But they only let alternates sign up for that interview spot the night before the interview. And, I knew I was an alternate. I didn't know how many other alternates there are out there. So pretty much everyone's competing to get that one spot that opens up at midnight. So I vividly remember I was in the library with a friend. We were in like a small study room together. I was on my laptop with this interview sign-up sheet pulled up on my laptop. And my friend was right next to me with his MacBook. And he had like this massive clock just on his screen, full screen. And he turns it towards me. And I was like 11:58 p.m. and 17 seconds. Then 11:59 p.m., 39 seconds. And then 11:59, 53 seconds. And then at 11:59:56, I hit refresh for the very last time so I could hit that page right as it hit midnight. And thank goodness I very luckily snagged that alternate spot. This was finally the chance that I had waited for to prove that I could be a consultant. And 8 hours later, I was there for the interview, dressed in my suit, and I had the opportunity to prove myself as a viable consultant. I focused on what I had already accomplished as a leader of campus, what I had done with PUC and PLBD. They asked me about my lack of business experience. They said, "Oh, I see on your transcript that you don't have any business classes or accounting classes or econ or hard math." And I advocated for myself. I talked about how I had done so much psychology coursework that was still relevant to consulting. I also really dug into how I had demonstrated my leadership through my roles on campus on PUC and PLBD. As an aside, this is another good point that if you continue to pursue what you love, it'll end up still paying dividends. So for me, I got involved as chair of PUC because I was really passionate about health, right? I still am very passionate about health, even though I'm not pre-med. But I got involved with PUC initially just as a regular person, and then I became more and more involved and ended up joining the board as chair. And I remember my mom, my sophomore year, would ask me, she would say, why are you putting so much time into these extracurricular activities? You should just spend your time studying. And I would say, oh, but I like doing this. I think this is super fun. And she'd be like, okay, but I think your time is better spent studying. And ultimately it did end up being beneficial because I was able to talk about these experiences. I was able to say what I was able to accomplish as a leader on campus. So if you continue to do the things that you love, it will end up still being beneficial for you down the line. Another funny story is around the topic of ballroom dancing. So I started ballroom dancing in college and spent a lot of time doing it because if anyone's done a sport, not that ballroom dancing is that strenuous of a sport, but it definitely requires time. I would probably spend 5 to 10 hours a week practicing with my partner. And I remember thinking, I'm spending all this time, I'm never going to become a professional dancer. Why am I spending hours upon hours every single week practicing these moves? But it's not become such a passion of mine. It's something that I still do today. It's like a great stress relief. I love doing it. I love being able to talk about ballroom. And I also really love being able to teach ballroom to people that I meet. And I think a ballroom is a universal language. Dance is a universal language. Even when I go to China, we're all still dancing the same dances. So I'm really excited to be able to have that ability and to be able to take that with me wherever I am in the world. So going back to this interview, summer, starting of junior year, interviewing for these summer internships, I was in that interview really advocating for myself, saying, okay, I'm not like any other applicant. I am unique and I bring this new potential. And yes, maybe you have to take a leap of faith to take me on, but I will make it worth your while. And what do you know? Later that day, I got a phone call from the interviewer and I had landed the internship. I had successfully made my way and taken my first step into consulting. And this is my second lesson. Advocate for yourself. Even if the odds aren't in your favor, even if you are a psychology major in a pool of business majors, if you advocate for yourself, you will be able to get yourself a spot in the places that you deserve. This brings us to my third lesson. Dream a little bigger. So those of you who may know me well may know that my favorite movie is Inception. And there's a really great quote from Inception called, "You mustn't be afraid to dream a little bigger, darling." And this is spoken by Eames. Kind of like, if anyone knows Inception, it's the dream within a dream, or so like the first layer down. And I think it's just really stuck with me ever since the movie first came out about 13 years ago, just a very long time ago. So this lesson has two stories associated with it. The first story is about Oraculi. And Oraculi requires a little bit of a backstory. So I had mentioned earlier that I grew up thinking that I wanted to be pre-med. And in high school, I got the opportunity to get involved in biomedical research. And I competed in the Rochester Regional Science Fair from 7th grade all the way until 12th grade. Honestly, science fair was such a great experience. I used to be really shy about speaking to people, which is kind of crazy to think now that I'm speaking to, 60 some people on this Friday evening. But I think science fair really allowed me to come out of my shell. I was able to share my research with judges. I was able to share my research to my friends. It was the first time that I was really genuinely doing something of my own and something that I was really proud about. So science fair, I think, was a very pivotal experience for me throughout high school. And I encourage everyone here to try it if they're interested. After graduating high school, I stayed involved with the fair. Throughout college, I came back, I was kept in the loop. I read the newsletters. I came and judged when I could. I started an award for first-year participants and just really wanted to continue giving back to an organization that had given me so much during high school. Come in 2020, February 2020, I got the opportunity to come back and judge the fair. And I think I see a few names here actually who competed in the fair both this year and last year. So I might have judged your project. But February 2020, I came back with another friend, David, and we judged the fair. And back in my day, when we competed in the fair, it was about 200 to 300 people. We would fill up the gymnasium at RCTC. And in the middle of the afternoon, you would get just like a roar of people talking because they would be talking about their projects. And it would be so hard to almost hear yourself. You would have to shout to the judges who were standing right next to you. And it was always such an exciting experience because there's so many people in that room with you. And so February 2020, when I came back to judge, we no longer were in that big gymnasium. We had moved to the small gymnasium. And not only were we in the small gym, we were in half of the small gym. And we had shrunk from 200 to 300 participants to just 60. I'll pause here. I see 2 raised hands. I think, Yo-Yo, I believe you're the first one to raise your hand. Yo-Yo, do you have a question?
Sorry, that was a mistake.
Okay, no problem. Cool. I also saw Sasha raise their hand, but now it's not anymore. So, okay, no problem. But if you do have a question, feel free to come off mute. So back to my story. February 2020, I was judging 60 people. We were in the small gym in half of it. And it was just so honestly disappointing to see. We had been such a great science fair with so many amazing resources. And now we were so small. There were, 30% the number of people who had competed previously. And this really stuck with me. I started really thinking about it, the fair has fallen so far, but not only has it fallen, it's now become less of an experience for the students. Sure, it's kind of sad for me as an alum, but the people who are really impacted are the students who participate in the fair, because now that it's smaller, there's fewer judges, there's fewer donors. It's just not as much of an experience like I had gotten to do in high school. And I wanted to make sure that future kids in Rochester would get the same science fair experience that I had, that same, 200 people fighting to hear yourself over everyone else talking around you. So March 2020, the pandemic came, as we all know. I came back to Minnesota and stayed at home with my family. And like many other people out there, when they tell you to stay at home, I ended up running outside because staying at home was just, it was too much for hours on end. So I started running, and to this day, I'm still a really bad runner. I hate running. It's painful. It's exhausting. But the good thing about running is that it's so painful and exhausting that you often try to distract yourself by thinking of different things. And I remember I was running in a parking lot that's pretty close to my house. And during that run, I randomly thought of an idea. I thought to myself, what if I were to mentor a few students? I had done science fair for so long. I knew what it took to do a science fair project. I knew what it meant to do research. And I definitely had enough STEM knowledge to help a middle school student out with their first project. And I thought, I love working with kids. This is definitely going to be super fun. All I have to do is just find 2 kids and mentor them, So a few days later, I was on a Zoom call with friends, because that's what you do in the middle of a pandemic. And I sort of floated this idea to him. And he was also an alumni of the school district. We were still really close friends. We had met through science fair. And he ended up being so passionate about the idea. He said, this is a really cool idea. I think there's a lot of potential. And it was so crazy that the small idea that I had when I was running actually resonated with other people. And so from there, the word just started to spread. We reached out to our fellow friends who were also science fair alums. We just teased this idea of, hey, would you be interested in mentoring a few students this upcoming year? And before we knew it, we ended up having over 20 mentors interested in supporting this idea of mentoring and giving back to the community that had given so much to them throughout their time here. And if you had asked me at the start of 2020 whether I could see myself being a nonprofit founder, I would vehemently say no. It's still really crazy to me to think that I am a nonprofit founder today. I remember when I was younger, when people would say, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to start a business. My dad has always said, oh, he would be interested in starting a business. It was like, I would always be like, oh, cool, good for you. Because I was never that creative. I could never really think of a new idea. starting a business requires having a novel idea. And I would always be like, oh, like maybe this invention would be cool. But then it turns out that invention already exists. Or like, oh, this idea is really neat, but someone's already doing that. So it's still so crazy to me to think that the small idea that I had has actually ended up becoming something that's grown and become so big. So Oraculi, in our very first year, our pilot year, we were completely virtual, and we ended up successfully mentoring 13 students, which, yes, 13 is not that big. If it were up to me, I would have loved for it to be 31 students. But in the middle of a pandemic, completely virtual, pilot year, very much a success. All 13 of our students won awards at Regional Science Fair, and many of them continued on to state and even to international competition. And if you guys are interested in helping out with Oraculi, I can definitely talk a lot more about it. I realize I have a slide here that I can chat a little bit more about. But as a quick call out, we are looking for high school, college, and also young professional mentors for the upcoming school year. Our email is oraculi.mentor@gmail.com. Email that if you guys are interested in getting involved. We are both virtual and in person here in Rochester, which is so exciting. And to give you guys a little bit of context, I'm very proud of this. So Oraculi is derived from the Latin word for mentor, which I believe is oraculum. And this logo has an O connected to two other O's, which stands for O3, which is ozone, aka symbolizing, rising above or rising beyond. And it also symbolizes the network that a mentor has. So one mentor is supporting two mentees, who then go on to, in the future, support two more mentees, just showing that network effect of what we can do. But to kind of talk a little bit more about Oraculi, we are a STEM mentorship program. So we pair young professionals and Rochester alumni with K-12 students interested in research and scientific inquiry. The idea is that when I went to the science fair, I saw a lot of students who kind of were like me. They have parents at home who were involved in Mayo Clinic. Maybe they worked at IBM or had some sort of STEM background. And for example, when I was doing my science fair project, I had a question about concentrations and how I could make different concentrations of a solution. And fortunately, I have my mom and my dad who can help me out with that question. But there are so many students out there who don't have parents who are that familiar with STEM, or maybe their parents aren't confident about supporting them in their research. And that's what Oraculi is designed to support. We are here for students who otherwise don't have the resources to do a science fair project, to support students who otherwise may never have considered doing the science fair. And that's, what I am so proud to bring to this, to Rochester. And yes, it looks like I just got a chat question. Yes, I did make Oraculi. I am one of 3 co-founders, and we are officially a nonprofit based out of Minnesota, and very excited for our upcoming year. In our pilot year, we were completely virtual. In this upcoming year, we will be virtual again, but we are launching an in-person mentorship program at Kellogg Middle School, and also expanding from just middle school to high school and also elementary school. So again, oraculi.mentor@gmail.com. I'm going to drop it in the chat so you guys have it, because we are very excited to get more mentors. But reach out if you guys are interested in getting involved. With that little detour, I want to go back to the bigger lesson. So dream a little bigger. Bringing it back to Oraculi. It was such a small idea that I had when I was just out running, in the middle of a pandemic. And I let myself dream a little bigger. I let that idea take root, and I spoke about it to other friends, and we all let ourselves dream a little bigger. We all thought that this was a little bit crazy, but even though it was a little bit crazy, it was definitely worth a try. And by dreaming a little bigger, we were able to make that dream a reality. And it's something that I'm still so excited and so wild to me that it actually has become what it has become today. The second story that I wanted to share on this topic is about the Schwarzman Scholars Program. So I am ethnically Chinese. Both of my parents are immigrants from China. And I had always made it a goal of mine to spend more time in China, especially in my early 20s. All my family is over there. My grandparents are getting a little older. I can speak and listen in Chinese, but I'm illiterate. So I thought it was a good opportunity for me to improve my Chinese. And this had always kind of been an idea in the back of my mind to go spend more time in China. So in May 2020, I got an email in my, school email about fellowship opportunities. And at first I like literally thought it was spam. I was just about to delete it. But I thought, okay, fellowships, sounds legit. So I'll actually open this and read about it. And one of the fellowships that they talked about was called Schwarzman Scholars. And it was a 1-year master's program based in Beijing. I thought, okay, that's kind of interesting. It would let me go and spend time in China. I would get to learn a little bit more and study academically, and definitely would be interested in a 1-year master's. It's all expenses paid, which is definitely really great, not having to pay to go to China. But then the whole catch was when I went and looked it up online, it was a 4% acceptance rate, which is really crazy. How I don't really know if I am one of 25. That's just such low odds. So that was a little bit unnerving. So I didn't really think too much about it. But starting in May and throughout the rest of the summer, this idea of Schwarzman really started to stick in my head. Over the upcoming weeks, I started to really think about, should I apply to this program? And would it be, a good time investment? The thing is, the application is a big time commitment. Not only did it require my time of writing the essays, but it would also require my recommenders' time. I had to ask 3 recommenders for letters of recommendation, which takes them time, and they're all very busy people with many better things to do. So for me to decide to do this application meant that I really had to go in and give it 120% to make it not only worth my time investment, but also my recommenders' time investment. And after sitting on it for a few weeks, I decided to go for it and just really buckled down and gave it all that I got. So as I was in, the midst of writing the application, I distinctly remember this, but I think it was around August. And in Minnesota in August, that's apple picking season. And if you're in Minnesota, you usually drive out to Wisconsin to go apple picking. And it's like kind of a full day thing. You take 2 hours to go to Wisconsin and 2 hours back. And then on the car ride back home, my mom sits in the passenger seat and I sit in the back with my brother because the back seat is for the kids. And I remember my mom just like looked over her shoulder and she was like, Annie, I think you have most at 30% chance of getting into this program. And for context, she had taken some time to read up the biographies of the scholars who had been admitted into the program. And they're all just amazing. It's so like they're doing like life-changing things out there. You have, even within my cohort, so my fellow classmates, you have startup founders, you have a New York Times bestseller, you have the youngest diplomat in Australian history. Like they're doing amazing things. They're changing the world. So she had read these backgrounds and, it seemed like she was pretty skeptical of my chances. And she said 30% chance, which is like pretty much of a bummer. 30% is pretty low. It's definitely below 50%. And usually when people are like, oh, what are my chances? You kind of say 50% just to be nice, right? Because it's like, oh, like 50-50. So for my mom to say 30%, that meant she was pretty, skeptical about my chances. But the thing is, parents also have a parent multiplier. So her saying 30% realistically meant that she probably thought I had at most a 5% chance of getting it. So she really did think there was any shot. But I dreamed a little bigger. I put my blood, sweat, and tears literally into this application. I went for it. I had so many people review it. I took a lot of critical feedback. My essays were just absolutely a mess from the first iteration. And I was able to really grow them from the mess that they were into a pretty polished final essay. I submitted my application and, crossed my fingers and successfully landed an interview. And I remember when I got that interview invitation email, I messaged everyone who had helped me throughout the essay process just to thank you and update them that I had actually moved on to the interview, which was so wild to me at the time. And I remember the next day, my mom kind of sat me down and she was like, okay, I think you have a 50% chance that you've made it into the interview round, which, and then you take into the parent multiplier again, that's like 10%. Still not that high. Even with my mom's doubt, I persevered. I believed that I could do it. I had made it to the interview round. And there's a saying that we often would say back when you're recruiting. Once you've made it to the interview, the spot is yours to lose. For some, that mindset might not actually be helpful. For me, it was really helpful. And I thought, I have this interview round. It's my spot to lose. If I show them who I genuinely am, I will be able to make a spot. And it's like that kind of positive thinking, that dream a little bigger, that like, I will break down any door that's in my way. That sort of mindset, I think, has really helped me along the way. I believed that I could do it. And to my great delight, I did. I was accepted into the 6th cohort, and I'm going to be flying out to Beijing in just a few short weeks to join my fellow scholars. And I'm so excited for this amazing opportunity that I've been given. That brings us to the 3 lessons that I've learned to finding my passion. On a final note, the stories that I've shared today, and many stories that you hear throughout your life, are all mostly stories that turned out positively. But I also want to remind you guys that I've dreamed many dreams that didn't end up working out. In college, I actually had a wall of rejection letters from companies. I was at a point, like I said, in my junior year, I was getting rejection after rejection that I put it up on a wall to humble myself, to say, I think I'm all that, but in reality, there's so much more out there that is, has rejected me. So that's that. I also applied to deferred MBA programs my senior year. I think I applied to 5 programs, rejected from all of them, didn't even make it to a single interview, just flat out rejected. And, I had to bounce back for that. It was devastating, but sometimes your dreams don't end up landing. The important thing to take away from those experiences is to persevere. Not every dream will work out, but like Wayne Gretzky said, and this is super cliche, but it's true, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. If you dream a dream and you don't take any action towards that dream will never happen. If you dream a dream and you take action, there is a small chance, maybe a 4% chance that dream will happen. But if you shoot for the moon, even if you miss, you'll land among the stars. With that said, thank you all for listening to my stories this evening or this morning. I hope you guys all learned a little something and enjoyed hearing my tales. And I'm so excited for everything that comes ahead for you guys. Super open to talking about anything that you guys might want to learn about, whether that's for Cooley, Schwarzman scholars, ballroom dancing, psychology, all that. I am open to any of your guys' questions if you have them. Thank you.
There are some of the questions in the pre-collecting form you can answer now.
Yeah, I don't have that in front of me. Would you mind asking those?
I think the first question is how to identify and to cultivate the students' interest.
Gotcha. Okay. So I assume this is from a parent's perspective.
Yes, I think.
Yeah. So I can answer from what I know as a daughter. I think for me, the most helpful thing hearing from a parent is for the parent to listen, because everyone has their interests, and it might not seem your child has an interest, but everyone has an interest. And if you listen and you let that interest grow, that will end up paying dividends. I think another thing is sometimes maybe those interests might be video games, which might not be the most productive interest per se. But even from that, you can kind of start to think people like different types of video games for different reasons. Some are very strategy based, some are, maybe more artistic, stuff like that. There is a deeper passion underlying all of that. So listening, observing, encouraging is also really important. And being patient and giving your child time to let that passion grow.
Well, the next question is how to help a junior to identify his or her true interest and major selection in college application.
Yeah, that's definitely a tricky one. So as a junior in high school, you've probably gotten a chance to do a number of classes. Hopefully by that time, at least you might know which classes you don't like. And I've always found that sometimes when I'm making decisions, it's easiest to just mark out the things that I definitely don't want to do. And from there, you can start to whittle down things that you might end up enjoying a little bit more versus things you might enjoy a little less. And from there, you can start to understand what you might want to major in. And again, it's totally fine if you apply as an undecided major. I have plenty of friends who did that too. I would say as a junior in high school, you also want to remember to keep your options open. Maybe you were like me and you thought you wanted to be a doctor coming out of high school. And if I didn't keep my options open, I would have just stormed down that path of biology and maybe I would be a doctor now. and I would probably enjoy it. But I kept my options open, and I discovered consulting, and I discovered nonprofits and my love for education. And I think that has been so rewarding as well. So keeping your options open is also a good thing to keep in mind.
Another question is how to develop the leadership.
Okay, yeah. So leadership is, I always say the easiest way to develop leadership is to not go looking for leadership opportunities, because if you look for leadership opportunities, you're doing it for the wrong reason. The easiest way to develop leadership is to get involved in something you're passionate about. For me, for example, let me think. Yeah, like I said with Puck, right? I came in on campus being really passionate about health. And I just got involved with Puck just as a general body member. I wasn't anything special, wasn't doing any leadership. But I was very active in the meetings, and I spoke up and I shared my opinion. And I think they recognized that, and they nominated me to the board. So if you are passionate about something, maybe that's chess, maybe that's Dungeons and Dragons, maybe that's video games, whatever it might be, there's always an opportunity to take leadership. Maybe it's organizing meetings. Maybe it's planning the next thing. Maybe it's planning like a big event where a lot of people get to come together, hopefully after the pandemic ends. All those different things lead to opportunities for leadership. So if you can find something that you love and continue doing that, you can then cultivate opportunities for leadership.
There are two questions in the chat. The first one sent to me. What was the most challenging thing while you were looking for your interest?
While was I looking for my interest? That is
the most challenging thing.
Okay, yeah. I think the most challenging thing is there's quite a few challenging things. Let's start with the first one. So my first lesson was give up dreams that aren't yours. At the beginning, it was really difficult to discern which dreams were truly mine and which dreams weren't mine. Because like I said, I kind of lived 12 years of my life thinking I was destined to become a physician. And for me to kind of recognize that, oh, maybe medicine isn't really what I thought it would be, that was like, that changed my life, you know, like 12 years of my life had kind of been a lie. So recognizing that some dreams that aren't yours and being able to let go, that was really difficult. I think another thing is definitely advocating for yourself. I was quite shy when I was young. I was very, very shy, very afraid of speaking in public, didn't really like speaking up for myself. And learning to advocate for myself and talking about what I had accomplished, why I deserved a seat at that table, I think has really been really beneficial to my life. And it's quite difficult, and it's definitely takes some time getting used to. But I'm really glad that I was able to start to get a little bit better at that and continue to get better at it today.
So the next question in the chat is to share your experience for applying for the scholarship. I guess you can spend a couple more time to tell us what are you going to do as they told you for this 1 year in Tsinghua University. Yeah.
Sure. So I'll start with the latter question, then I'll go back into my experience and apply. So in this 1 year, we are very lucky to actually be in person at Tsinghua this year. So we're going to be at Tsinghua, and part of it is academic. You're going to be taking classes. There is a special curriculum built for us. I'm personally going to be focusing a lot on not-for-profit leadership, which I'm very excited to do. There's also a thing called deep dives, which is where they'll take us essentially on week-long field trips around China to see different cities in China as well as different industries. Some people might shadow politicians. Some people might shadow, teachers in the classroom. Some people might shadow businessmen. There's another element that is like language immersion, so learning Chinese. There's also the final element is just getting to people, meeting all your fellow scholars, the other 149 people who are out there with you, and really just kind of learning from each other, learning what we've accomplished so far in our leadership and supporting each other in our leadership in the future. My experience in applying for the Schwarzman scholarship is the application is actually, it takes a lot of intensity because they ask some tough questions about what you want to accomplish with your life. And it's very introspective, literally blood, sweat, and tears. Like I cried a lot while writing this essay because there's so much that I was trying to discover about myself. But it's mainly 2 essays about your greatest sort of leadership accomplishment, and then also what you want to do in China and what you can learn from China. And I think just writing those essays was just honestly a really good reflective process. At the end, when I submitted my essays, I realized even if I don't get in, just this process of writing the essays has really grounded me and has allowed me to understand what I actually value in life. And it's allowed me to kind of get a new perspective moving on in my career. I have a few questions that were direct messaged to me, so I can answer these. So Michael asked, are you open to answering a math question? It really depends on what kind of math question. I'm very not good at calculus. If it's like a simple math question, potentially, feel free to drop it in the chat. But yeah, math has never been my strong suit. That's more my brother's area of expertise. But yeah, Michael, if you want to drop your question in the chat, I may or may not give it a go. Looks like LV7 asked, during my time of giving up fake dreams, how do you overcome unsure doubts at the bottom of your heart, especially among family and friends who are eager to advise you? Which is a very tricky question. There's definitely, I remember, fortunately, my parents have both been extremely supportive throughout this whole process. But there's always a little bit of uncertainty when you're kind of giving up fake dreams, right? Especially this idea of being pre-med. It was something that I had talked about for so long while I was growing up, that my parents were just kind of like, oh, she's going to be a doctor. And for me to kind of give that up, I think at first my mom was supportive, because what else are moms supposed to do, right? They're supposed to be supportive. But I'm sure she was probably a little concerned, because now I was venturing into this new path that I didn't know, that they weren't familiar with. And certainly there was a lot of doubt that they had. There was certainly a lot of doubt that I had. So much that I had sort of taken to be true about myself was now no longer true. So I think overcoming those doubts takes time, but it also takes confidence in yourself. I think you have to know yourself, which is much easier said than done. But the more that you kind of think about what gets you going in the morning and like what you truly want to live your life doing, I think that will continue to power and overcome those unsure doubts. And especially, so family and friends who are eager to advise you. I have a lot of family and friends who give me a lot of advice, and a lot of that advice is helpful. Some of that advice is less so. I think it takes a certain level of discernment to understand, yes, this piece of advice is very helpful, but sometimes you just have to storm your own way forward. And yes, I've made mistakes. I've definitely not listened to advice, and I should have listened to that advice, and I made mistakes. But it's all part of life, right? If I make those mistakes, I'm going to learn from them, and I won't make that same mistake again, hopefully. But it's just another lesson of, yes, some advice is great, some advice is less great. Discern what advice you want to follow. Respect your friends and family who are willing to give that advice to you, because that's also hard to do. And make your understand what you think is right for yourself. And next question is your nonprofit organization aims to help students be successful or help kids learn how to explore themselves? Okay, this is a good question, and one that we had discussed, my co-founders and I talked about a lot at the founding of Oraculi. And I pretty explicitly told them, I said, I don't want to help other Annies, right? Like, yeah, I did quite well in science fair growing up because I have a lot of support. I was able to do a lot of really cool things. I have my parents at home. Our goal through Oraculi is not to get a young Annie to the International Science Fair, because young Annie probably can get there either way. Our goal is to get kids who probably never would have done science fair into the science fair, and for them to be like, that was so cool, I'm going to do this again. And to give them the knowledge to do that fair for the very first year, and then to do it for years and years and years onwards. And for them to also feel as passionate about the fair as we are, and for them to mentor other students moving forward. So I would definitely say it's kind of the latter, definitely not the first. Of course, we want our students to be successful in the fair, but that's not the goal. If our students don't do well at the fair, that's totally fine. Our goal is not to go there to win. Our goal is to just get the students into the fair and to have them be proud of what they've accomplished through this research, and to have them embark upon that first journey of becoming a scientist and thinking critically about the world. Jerry asked a question: if you don't know what your passion is and are still discovering, how do you make time for all your passions? Which is definitely a really good question. I often get this question as well, because I think to a lot of people, I kind of do a lot of stuff in my life. And they're always like, how do you make time for everything? I kind of think about it, and I actually sleep a decent amount of time. I really like to sleep 8 hours a day. My parents back in high school, they would always be like, is she dead? Like, she's sleeping for so long. So I get a decent amount of sleep. I think it's so cliche, but that's the good thing about cliches, which is they're true. If you truly have a passion, you'll make time for it. If something is your passion, you'll like want to do that and you'll want to continue doing that. I do think one thing that I want to highlight is even if something is your passion, there's probably going to be elements of that thing that you don't enjoy, right? I love Oraculi. I love what we do. I don't really love replying to like filling out forms and like applying to like different bureaucratic things and like applying to our nonprofit license. Like I don't love every single minute of Oraculi, but I love what we're doing at the end of the day. And I guess that's not super related to the question, but it is something that I wanted to throw out there. You don't have to love every single minute. You just have to love what you're working for. Cool. Okay. So Cassie said, currently a student at Penn, always great to meet a fellow Penn student, and struggled a bit with imposter syndrome. Did you ever feel something similar or observe your peers feeling the same? And how do you, oh boy, sorry, I just got a lot more questions. And how do you have any advice on how to deal with and overcome this? This is something that is very near and dear to my heart. I actually wrote about imposter syndrome in my application for Schwarzman. Imposter syndrome is so crazy and so rampant on college campuses. And to those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's kind of the idea of like, I don't really deserve to be here. Or like, how would I make my way here? You know, like maybe they actually meant to admit another Annie's son. They like actually admitted the wrong Annie's son. And it's this idea of like, everyone here is so much better than me. I can't like live up to them. And what I want to say and tell you, Cassie, and tell anyone else who's dealing with this is like, don't let it get to you. Your imposter syndrome is like recognize it, but also recognize that that's not who you are, you know, like you deserve to be there. If you're sitting in that classroom with your peers or your Zoom classroom, you deserve to be there. Penn admitted you for a reason. The other thing is to recognize that you have these self-doubts and to kind of just like understand that they exist, to like recognize that you have these kind of lurking thoughts, I think has helped me at least acknowledge kind of how I'm feeling and has helped me to work towards it. I definitely had a lot of imposter syndrome while I was at Penn. And it's something that still plagues me today, right? Especially as a female in business, it's kind of something that we often talk about. And I think just recognizing it, but also recognizing that you deserve to be there, you deserve to have a seat at the table, and that you've accomplished so much and you can accomplish so much more has been what's propelled me past those self-doubts. Okay, next up, Alex asked, from your experience, any tips or suggestions to help young students to improve their well-being? Well-being can be defined in a lot of different ways, which is why I'm thinking physical well-being is easy. Drink a lot of water. That's been one of my goals for 2021. Eat healthy, specifically eat more fruits and vegetables. I recently became vegetarian, which my parents are like really confused about. But I think eating fruits and vegetables are always good. And exercise, but I know that's not actually what you're asking. So like overall well-being, if you find something that you love, that definitely contributes to it. If you find, I think giving back is so important. Being able to volunteer and serve your community, feeling like you are part of a community is so important. I think feeling like you have an obligation to do something to support other people, to support the next generation, maybe to support the elderly, whatever it may be, giving back to the community is so beneficial. So I would recommend all young students here, if you have an opportunity to volunteer, to serve your community, whether that's, you know, Oraculi helping other students, or maybe working at the local animal shelter because you love working with animals. Any of that is possible. Any of that is viable. Just giving back to your community, I think, will definitely improve well-being. I got another question about Oraculi, which is this only for Minnesota students? Not at all, actually. So Oraculi, yes, we did start as a group that is focused on Rochester alums. And while we love having Rochester alums, we actually did have mentors from like not Rochester. So one of our mentors last year is actually my neighbor in Boston, and he grew up in Kansas. So he has like no connection whatsoever to Rochester. So if you're interested in mentoring, we want to take you. Even if you're in New York, obviously you'll mentor virtually, but we're very happy to have you, and we will connect you with a Minnesota student who needs your support. So definitely open to anyone. We had mentors call in from like Puerto Rico last year, so very flexible. I think those are all the questions that I've received. Yi, did you get any?
No, I don't have any more questions.
Okay. Cool. I also know we're at the top of the hour. I'm happy to stick around and answer more questions if anyone has them. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining me this evening. I hope you guys learned a little something. And thank you so much for those of you who asked questions. They're all very, very good. And definitely let me think a little bit more. I guess, who asked about the math question? Yeah, Michael, I don't think you put in your math question, but maybe that's for my own benefit.
Yeah, thank you for Annie for the wonderful seminar tonight. Maybe in half a year, you can give a seminar again, tell us what you're learning in Tsinghua.
Of course, yeah, definitely. If I have good enough internet, definitely happy to be back.